Hello, this is RJB-Mallacore, and today I'm going to be doing some 3D modeling for you. So the model that I'm working on today, I've already started this and I'm a fair ways along, is a model or a concept art by Adam Azel, and basically his concept is of a early Gould shuttle. I'll probably end up using it for something along the lines of a free Jaffa shuttle, just because I like the concept of the tech being simplified, and I can see them as a people sort of following suit in that way. You know, don't need the same glamour and flashiness that the Gould have. So this is sort of where I'm at on the model. So it's pretty close to being done. And basically what I have left to do is some of the underside here. So basically just fleshing out this area, and then this model will be basically done at this point. If anybody has any questions, feel free to ask. And if not, I'm pretty much going to start diving in and working on this one. Okay, so I think my first step is I want to sort of extend a section through here to connect these two zones. So let's grab a few polygons here, just so I can have a bit of a clearer area to work with. Yeah, it always helps to clear out some of the clutter so it's not all in your way and distracting you. That gives me sort of a pretty good idea of where I'm working around. And I want to curve in these corners a little bit. And one of the other things I'll be talking about a little later in this stream is I want to go over some of the models that I've been working on over the last few months, just to give people an idea of what I've been up to. And one of the reasons I haven't been streaming too much is just a combination of my real-time job, so the workload's been pretty busy, and a little bit of dealing with health at the time. So that's unfortunately sort of slowed me down a bit. Let's see how that's looking. I think that looks pretty good coming down the ship. And one of the things I like about this design is, even though it's, you know, very blocky in shape, it also feels very almost speedy in design. Like there's a certain, I don't know what you'd really call it, almost like a race car feel to it. Okay, let's merge that in there. And again, if anybody has any questions, feel free to ask. Shrink that down a little bit. And this part I think I'm going to sink in a bit. I think we can go double that. And then sink it in by 1. I'm really enjoying the shapes in this one. Okay, what should I do with this section? And even though the drawings have quite a bit of detail to them, there is, quite a bit of leeway left in the design, because you sort of have a really good side profile, a good top profile. In this case, I decided to go more symmetry with the doorway, just because you're not always necessarily going to have to leave from the same side of the ship. But with this design, it really leaves the underside vague. Like, you can tell that there's some sort of pods on this side. There's a section that comes down over here, but the rest is sort of left up to your imagination. And I kind of enjoyed concept art like this because it allows me to sort of put a little bit of my own personal self into them. Let's bring this out. I think I'll bring these. Actually, I don't want to move that yet. I think I'll bring these out here. Do a little bit of cutting of the model out here just because it's a little easier to see what I'm doing. Unselect that. Raise these ones out a little bit. Not quite that far on these. I'll bring these out by 1. I think I'll come in about there on both sides. As you can tell, there's quite a bit of eyeballing that goes on. Like, I try hard to keep the models symmetrical, but sometimes it is easier just to eyeball certain parts, and then if there's any flaws, I'm pretty much the only person that knows about them. Well, besides the people watching today. Probably can bring that in by 50 millimeters, and probably can sink it in by a similar amount. And I think I'm gonna give these the orange glow that I have going on across the different parts of the ship. A little too much in there. I'm going to bring this in by 0.5, and I want to bring this out maybe by 0.3. So, see how it looks. I think that looks pretty good. And I'm almost tempted to sink these in. Like, I like to build up levels of depth. What happens if I bring them in by 0.1 and again by 0.1 inwards? I think that looks pretty good. It's amazing how just a little bit of extra depth on the model can do so much for it. Okay, let's continue on to this section. Cut this up a bit. One spot there. And one around there. Clear out the rest of this. And then just not too much on that. Let's go 0.02 on there. Still much. Helps if I adjust things in the right spot. There we go. That's what I'm talking about. And it just gives it some sort of detail where it connects into the rest of the ship. And then that allows me to deal with this section here. So I'll take that out there. A little bit of funky stuff going on there. So I'm just gonna trim around that. Just so I have a cleaner work area to. Now that would be. And then with this, we're gonna cut them up. We'll see how that sort of relates with some of the other portions. I want to go a little wider on that. So we will, I think, delete 2 of these in a second. I'm going to pull these out just so that I don't have as much going on while I'm adjusting this. Yeah, I'm thinking that's going to be the magic number for this. And we'll bring these in by 0.5 and out by 1, and that should give it a little bit of a gap between. Attach it back to the main model. And do I want to do anything with these side pieces? I think I might do something. Nothing overly special, because it doesn't have to be over the top for detail on this model. I'm trying to keep things a little bit on the simplistic side, but just enough to add a little bit extra to the design. And then let's see with these. Again, I want to keep them fairly simplistic. So I think I'm just going to run some almost like supports to this area, I think. Again, keep them the gray color. And for this, I'm gonna, I think, round out the corner there. And then we're going to have a couple that are higher. So I'm just going to bring them down a bit, I think. And maybe try to bring it a little bit more in line with the existing section. Let's have a looky, see how that comes across from here. And I can definitely slide things over a little bit, I think. So I think I'll bring these a little bit in tighter with how they should probably be sitting anyways. And let's see how that looks. Way better. And it's not always about being complex with the design. Just little elements to help break things up. Those always make a huge difference. Always the hard part, deciding where to go. Like, I'm almost debating, since this is going to be gray, that's going to be gray. Maybe I should make those sections the golden color. Bit of a pain in the butt to do, but the ends might justify the means. I think that pretty much got all of that. Let's see how it looks in gold. think I want to switch these small parts to gold as well. Just because they sort of taper in. I think that makes it look a little bit more natural filling. Zoom a little bit in here. Those gold as well. Yeah, definitely, I think that's the right choice to go with. I think the really difficult section is going to be in here because I'm not quite sure what I want to do down in there yet. I guess I shouldn't say I don't know. I have a few ideas, but nothing fully set in stone. So we're going to take that whole piece out of there. And I think what I want to do is I want to run some grooves into this. We'll make them about this wide. Again, not an exact science. Sure I get all of that selected. And we'll put it in context with the rest of the model. I'll raise it up. Oops. We do have a part missing. Toss him into there. We'll quickly cut him so that he fits in with the rest. Make sure everything's all properly connected here. So we'll do this the easier way. And we'll bring this up by 0.2. Way better. And maybe in by, and maybe down by 0.1. I think we'll go with that. Pull that out of there. And I think we'll add a few more sections in it because we want to be a similar size to what's there. So we'll add 2 more. Yeah, that looks about close to where we want to be. Do the same thing over here. Unfortunately, it takes a second to clear off the other cuts. So I want to select these. And then subdivide them a couple times. And then I want to select all of this. Let's see. I'm going to give this a I think I might have to subdivide it one more time, possibly. See if that looks better. Yeah, that's vastly better. This way it just sort of adds a little bit of a mechanicalness to the section. And again, if anybody has any questions, feel free to ask. And these, I think I just want to bring out somewhat. Around 80. Make sure it's not interfering with anything else on the model. I think I'll do a similar thing with this section, and then it'll just be the middle to sort of figure out. Just adds in that little bit of depth that it needs. I'm almost thinking that I'll just divide this into two and then create two sunken sections to add components to. And just so for other people who have joined, this is sort of where we're at with the full model at this point. So it's sort of at the finishing edge for it. So we're just sort of finishing off this section and then having this area in here to fill in. And again, just to sort of fill in people, this model is based on concept art by Adam Azel, and his concept was for an early era Gould shuttle, and for myself I'm probably going to use it as a free Jaffa shuttle, just because I believe that once they start to build their own ships, they'll go for a little more simplified design, because there's no point being over flashy like the Gould were. And this is sort of where we were at when we started today. So yeah, sort of the bridge section, door there, engine pods, ring transporter. And in these sections I wanted to sort of include an element from the show. If people sort of remember that there were Gould ship docks that were hovering, and they had these massive glowing engines. So I wanted to sort of build off of that concept and use them as like a hovering drive. So I sort of wanted to bring that over from elements from the show. And again, feel free to give your thoughts on the design, and I'm always, happy to hear what other people would like to see made in the future. Okay, so we have these two sunken areas. So I just have to figure out what I want to do with them. So I think I'll end up carving out an element from it. And like I've mentioned before, I do a fair bit of eyeballing, because you can always fine-tune things a little bit after, as long as you don't get too far ahead of yourself. So I want to bring these in. I think I'll bring this one over. So basically I'm building an element that'll be used as a stencil to cut out the polygon that's already existing inside the groove there. So stencil it in along the Y. Clear out this section a bit. And we'll bring that up like that. And then I'm going to build a little trench in here. Because I do want to work in a couple glowing elements. And we'll see what happens if I bring that down by that amount. I think that's sufficient. And I'm thinking I want to put these sort of in between where it curves in. Maybe somewhere, yeah, I think around there. And I'll bring these ones in a little bit deeper. And then let's put this back on the ship and see how she looks. Now, if I want to create a little bit of contrast here, I can make these the golden color. So let's see how that actually looks. Sort of conflicted on that. I sort of like the break, but I sort of like it how it was. I think I'm going to stick with how it was. I do want to kind of do something with this. Two empty spaces that are sort of going on. So let's bring this whole piece out. See what we sort of have to work with. I'm going to clean this up a little bit first. So we'll just raise these up, and then this one. Probably do something similar. And these ones I'm going to raise a little bit more aggressively. Oops. Always got to watch out for them chubby fingers. Something down there to work with. And this sort of brings us to our last section to work on. I think we'll do a similar thing of what we did with the other side. Just a little on the larger side for this one. Debating whether that sort of takes away. And I'm not quite happy with that. So maybe we'll go the other direction. Select both halves, because it's no fun creating extra work for yourself. And I think I'm going to try to bring this outward. And build up a little bit of extra height with this area. Let's see how that sort of looks. That's way better looking. And just so things don't get too ugly, once I start playing with this section, I'll fuse these points together. Sink that in. And that sort of gives it a little bit of randomization in that section. And since I want to frame off this section a little bit better, and I think that pretty much finishes off this model. I think we have about the right contrast. That'll be sort of the golden gold color to sort of gray mechanical, and I don't think we went too overboard with any glowing elements. You know, enough just to sort of break up different sections of the model. I think I'm pretty happy with the end result in this one. Sort of bring up our concept that we were working from. I think we did a pretty good job giving the existing concept art a shapes and all that. So we'll clear all this out. And we will open up another project. So this is one of my original Tari designs, and it's the I've called it the Mara class. And it's something I started years and years and years back, and when I took a hiatus from modeling, it sort of got left on the back burner. And since I've been sort of back for the last few years working on different projects, I decided to revive it and add it to my fleet that I've been building up. So just to sort of give an idea, this is where last time I was streaming I sort of left it off. Oh, how's it going? I just finished off the Gould shuttle, so I was about ready to start on the Mara. So I'll give sort of a bit of a recap. So I know, pretty sure you saw the concept art earlier in the day, and this is where I left it off before I started to do any streaming today. So he came pretty close to being done, and there was basically just the section in here, a little bit in there to finish off, and I'll sort of load him up as well and give you a tour on what we just finished. Yes, it's going to have a ring transporter on it. So this is sort of where we finished off. So I decided to sort of extend this area into the body in here, and decided to break it up with a little bit of the gold color. And then in the section down here, I just sort of filled it in with a little bit of, I guess I'd call it Gould tech grooving. So just sort of random little elements floating in there, just to give it sort of a bit of a mechanical look to it. And then just sort of filled in with some random shapes to help break up this area. Added in sort of some structure, support structure to fill in there, and then just sort of filled in this in a similar manner to sort of in there. Added a few little glowing elements because I find they help break up the model a little bit. And since we were talking about the transporter, so yeah, I did add one into the middle. It's basically set at the highest point for the pyramid, so it's going to be basically straight down from there. So it'll be the highest area in the cargo area. And at the back I sort of decided to go with Alkesh sort of design for the engines. I haven't decided if I'm going to keep them blue, but that was sort of the Alkesh color that they had. But all in all, I think it really came along pretty decently, and I'm actually really happy at how the shuttle looks. There's something about the design that makes it feel like it's fast. Feels like the simplified sports car version of Gould shuttles. Well, with the doors, what I was thinking, like I haven't built it into it, but my idea is, so your entrances are here, and I'm thinking that the panels will slide down and then shape into stairs. And then it'll just be an open entrance there. So So a little bit different, but I think it sort of stays with that ghoul shape morphing technology that you see in things like the helmets. Yeah, sort of a similar concept to that. And it's actually surprisingly, how big the shuttle is when you take the door and you put a normal person to it. The shuttle's actually quite a large ship, larger than I thought it would actually end up being. So it's about almost 52 meters in length. And that's using the door based on an average human height of about 1.775 meters. Well, there's plenty of room to get through the door. I'm sure if somebody's in an EVA suit, they'll still fit. It's not quite that tight. You don't have to grease up to slip through the entrance. Well, let's see where We'll bring in my friend Mr. Scaleman. A little bit closer to the door here. Yeah, there's a lot of things in Stargate where scale does not necessarily correctly apply. I was looking up measurements on the puddle jumper, and they're saying that it can fit 20 passengers in there, and I'm looking at the size of a person. I'm like, that's going to be a very uncomfortable trip. But it does give you an idea of how big the ship actually will be. Well, I'm sure a person could tuck themselves underneath. Well, if I actually did a floor plan for the ship, what I would actually be thinking of doing is you'd have the cargo area in the back, your sort of bridge section up front, and it would probably have some sort of separation, like an entrance to seal it off from the back area. Your ring transporter would be in the center. The part up here would be a sort of a secondary deck, which would have your crew sleeping quarters and that kind of stuff, and then your sort of engine components would sort of be included into these wing sections because they sort of tighten down. Yeah, well, that's what I was thinking of doing. The upper area as sort of a sleeping area. Like, doesn't necessarily have to be secret, but granted the ship is big enough that I'm sure you could build in secret compartments and like fake walls, and like I could see, the Free Jaffa selling something like this to the Lucian Alliance where they'd have hidden compartments. I'll never forget that how often our ship's built and never include a washroom. Don't know about you, but on long journeys I think I'd rather use the washroom than try to throw a baggie out the door. But like I say, I'm really happy with how the design turned out. Well, if I did the inside for the Tari jumper, I probably would include some sort of washroom area. It would sort of be like a tight little airplane washroom, but it would be semi-functional. And sort of talking about the jumper, might as well sort of load that up too. Kind of the areas that you never get to see because the wing section sort of sit in there. And again, the ships are always bigger than you sort of would think. You sort of see the guy in the relationship to the ship, and even the Stargate. You know, it's still a fair-sized object. But again, there's, you know, a surprising amount of room. Well, even the cab in this, like, if you have two people actually sitting side by side, you know, it should actually fit two people sitting. And then you'd have, you know, enough room for probably about 12 to 14 people in the back if they're just sitting. Probably closer to 10 if, as you said, you incorporate like a washroom. And then there's sort of the side engine thrusters. So these ones are sort of, the idea is, at least that I had for the ship, is you have the main engines. So they're bigger than a puddle jumper, so the ship would be quicker. It has a lot more engine power, and then the wings would be basically in charge of maneuvering. Your cloaking device would be built into these sections here, so a little bit more showy than on the puddle jumper. It actually has an element for that, and the shield emitters would sort of be in this area here. And then, obviously, one of the biggest things that people pointed out was sort of the unused space there. The main reason I sort of did it is I wanted to take the engines of the ship and separate it from the crew cabin, because if the ship is ever shot, you know, my theory is that, you know, last thing you want is exhaust to be leaking into your crew cabin, or any sort of smoke or damage leaking in there. It sort of creates a separation to help keep the crew safe if the ship's sort of adrift. And one of the other concepts that I was sort of playing with is if you just have a pilot and co-pilot, one of the elements could be where the front section of the ship could separate and eject and work as sort of an escape pod if the rest of the ship is sort of lost. Yeah, because you could sort of separate the ship out. And then obviously to sort of deal with the storage comments was to sort of come up with a portable storage unit. It only opens in the back, but, you know, the crew would sort of load itself on. The actual container would have hydraulic lifts, so it'll lift itself up so that the ship can bring itself in, lower itself down, then raise the back and then slide itself in. And then along here it'd be like some sort of magnetic attachment element to sort of connect the two parts. And the storage container, one of my ideas was that it's has a backup power supply, so when it's dropped off you'd have whatever weapons or elements that you would need, but it would also supply energy so that if the ship's gone and there's troops left there to do whatever they have to do, they have access to power, they have access to supplies. Some of the containers could be converted that they would have maybe a sleeping area up top if you needed a little bit harder shelter, or even if you wanted to go a little more simplified, they could take like a canvas section that might attach to the sides, and you could basically build a sleeping area around the container itself. And one of the things I do want to, on the ship or in the container, for subspace relays and communication. Well, the container could probably be outfitted however they sort of need to. It would be sort of a generic space. The ship would have normal communication technology, so it would have some sort of subspace communication. And sort of going back to the modular aspect, at some point when I have a little bit of extra time, I do want to build an EVA sort of module where I'd probably have a sort of similar setup, but these areas would be filled in and used as more of a storage space, so you'd have your EVA suits, and then the area could be sealed off and pressurized and depressurized. And another concept I was thinking about would be a module that would have like a heavy turret, so it would sort of fold around into itself, and then when it's ready to be deployed it would be dropped and fold out, and then it would have like a control area inside. Well, for EVAs, the suits would be stored inside the area in between, so there would be a section that would open up to the crew area, so the two areas would be connected, then this could be sealed, and then your suits would be stored in between so that a person can get sort of dressed, like they'd be exposed to vacuum if you're not wearing them. But it sort of allows a bit of a pressurized area. And sort of to show off some of the finished images for this one. So those are sort of the finished renders. So the ship has a miniaturized version of Asgard plasma beams. Again, a lot less powerful since the ship is only powered by sort of like a form of an enhanced Naquita generator, since larger ships would have something more Asgard based, but for miniaturization's sake I went with more of a traditional technology. So even though they're functional, they're nowhere near as powerful, but they'd still be effective against like larger ships like an Al-Kash. Again, sort of a bigger view. And one of the things that people have pointed out is that the door is fairly large, and one of the reasons I did that is I did want it to be able to store stuff inside, so if you just have the pilot co-pilot, you can actually store more things inside the space inside the ship if necessary. And sort of in relationship to an actual puddle jumper, this is a fan mesh, so proportions may be a little bit off, but basically the circumference should be what it should be to properly fit the gate. But the length may be a little bit longer, but again, for reference sake, it's pretty much close enough to give a person an idea. And again, sort of in relationship to the Stargate and in relationship to a person. Yeah, sort of a similar concept. You could bring, heavier guns and actually set up a proper fortification if you needed to. Like, I think at this point in, the show, like, yeah, you'd be exploring a bit with the, with a gate ship puddle jumper, but it would be more of a recon ship and almost like a drop ship for, dropping off people to areas that are already fortified and or that you are fortifying. Like, it's still fairly armed because it does have drone launchers inside the top. And then sort of in relationship to the large shuttle that I built to go with the Abydos class. So this one's sort of the rugged all-terrain. If your transporters aren't working and you have to land on a planet or do a rescue, it's your heavily armored, large capacity shuttle. Yeah, I've tried to sort of add some of the, even on the puddle jumper, or gate ship I guess it'd be, the concept of actually having some sort of thrusters for lift. They may not necessarily be like a chemical thruster, but something that would at least add a level of realism and mechanicalness to sort of how the ship functions. Like, even this one has several in different places. Sort of a bit of a better view on this one. Again, you sort of have thrusters down here and then the thrusters there. Well, one of the compliments I always got for my designs is when I build them, there's a lot of functional elements, so at least I'm not the only one that's been sort of thinking that way. It's good to know that some other modelers and designers have sort of included those elements. And this is sort of the heavy shuttle in relationship to, again, a fan model of Destiny's shuttle, just to give you an idea that, Destiny's shuttle is actually fairly large. Well, it's never too late to incorporate them if you're still plunking away on the model. And sort of this is a relationship of the different ships. So you have the Daedalus in relationship to the Abydos, and then the Abydos shuttle in relationship to itself. So it sort of gives you an idea of how it would fit inside of its docking bay. And even like on the Daedalus, it obviously fits easily in its hangar bays. I'm always happy at how the Abydos turned out, and if I get through the models that I'm aiming for this month, I'm hoping to maybe do one of the other modules for the Abydos, probably the heavy weapons one. I kind of want to build something with extra generators and some sort of drone bays, and then maybe larger turret mounted Asgard beam weapons. And again, with my sort of designs, I've started to go a different direction with the Asgard weapons and gave them more of a sort of a traditional beam cannon sort of look to them. So again, some renders of the heavy shuttle and the Abydos. Heavy shuttle heading up to Phoenix class and some friendlier support ships with it. And then just sort of over an icy sort of terrain look. And then one of the other projects I was working on, and this was a commission, is for the Helios. So this is probably one of my favorite big ship builds. Like, I always joke that it's kind of like the if the Daedalus went to the gym and decided to work out and get some extra muscles. Yeah, somebody actually mentioned that your cat was actually named that. But the concept behind this is it's sort of a long-range ballistic ship, so a lot of enhanced missiles that it would fire, different drone weapons, and then it would still have your normal Asgard beam weapons for closer combat. But basically it'd be for larger fleet engagements where you're trying to rain as much weapon power down on your enemies to thin out their numbers as fast as you can. I guess you'd almost call it like a Wraith battling inspired ship. And again, a lot of defensive railgun enclosures over top of a lot of the ship. Sort of learned from dealing with Wraith fighters. Again, like, really happy with how this ship turned out. Well, here's it sort of in contrast to the Daedalus. So it's not necessarily higher, but like I say, it feels a lot more muscular, a lot more heavily armored. Like, it definitely feels like a ship that'll take a lot more of a beating and keep on coming back for more. Yeah, it's a thick ship. But even though being like a very dense ship, I still really like how its design profile worked out. And the ship's not done until you've done the customary, hyperspace traveling scene. And at some point, like, I've done up a tutorial on how I've done my nebula backgrounds. So that's up on my YouTube page. But at some point I think I'm going to do another tutorial on how I sort of do some of the more complex elements in my background. Well, you best be getting on that. Your ship's going to feel lonely without a trip through hyperspace. But again, probably one of my favorite ships that I've built this year has been the Helios. But I pretty much say that about every ship that I've built. Let's see sort of where we're at with all these pictures, and let's see. Few of the renders that I've done for the gate ship. At some point in the future, like, I haven't had a chance, but I do want to spend a little bit of time and actually build a decent planetary model setup for doing some renders with gates and the ships along the surface and that. I've seen a few interesting concept arts for some different things that I think I can sort of give a Stargate twist to and expand on that I may do in the near future. I always sort of liked how this scene turned out. There's something majestic about watching the ships descend down towards the planet. And this was another one that I was working on. So I don't think these are the newest renders. We'll see if I can dig them up. So this one is sort of based on a series of books that I was reading. So basically it's the Bobbyverse books by Dennis E. Taylor, and the concept behind it is basically an owner of a tech company, a larger company, decides that they want to buy him out, and they basically give him an offer that he can't refuse, so he sells off his company and he's left with a massive fortune that he has to decide on how to spend. And one of his first purchases, sort of on a whim, is to invest in a cryogenic freezing company, with the hopes that if he ever dies, that in the future they can revive him and sort of hopefully fix what happened to him. So naturally, how most stories go, he finishes paying for the service and meets up with some friends and then heads out and gets hit by a car. And then he ends up waking up about 100 years in the future, and his body's gone and his mind has been converted into a uploaded AI. So basically the reason that they wanted his mind is that they need an AI to run the ship, because basically there's a big space race to explore nearby solar systems, because resources on Earth are getting tighter. And so his mind's uploaded on a ship sent out to another star, and basically the concept is it's like I can't remember what they're called, Van Neumann machines, where basically it shows up in a system, it launches drones, it collects resources, it uses the equivalent of 3D printers to build more ships, and then he takes copies of his mind and copies them into the new ships. And every time he makes a duplicate of himself, there's a certain level of drift because of some sort of quantum entanglement. You can't make perfect copies, and so he has different versions of himself with different quirks, and it sort of evolves into a book about saving humanity. And there's a lot of good geek sort of humor involved, like one of his replicants, because you can't call everybody Bob, so one's called Riker, and he sort of takes on the persona of Riker from Star Trek, and one decides to be sort of like Homer from The Simpsons, so he plays himself up as a comical character. And definitely so far there's 4 books out in the series, and they were good enough that I've actually went through and listened to all of them in a month, because I did them as audiobooks as I was working on models. But definitely worth reading. So this is sort of my take on the main ship, the Heaven 1. So basically on Earth, the states sort of collapsed and ate up a bunch of different smaller elements in North America, and sort of evolved into an extreme religious country. So that's basically why the ship ended up becoming Heaven 1. And obviously as a scientist in that, he sort of was a little resistant to the the rigging on the ship. It was a bit of a pain in the butt to do. Again, one of the reasons I actually liked doing this model is it was a little bit more challenging. But in the show, or not show, but in the books, the ships have, I don't think they were shock drives, but something similar in name to that. But basically they were like a form of a inertialess drive system. And again, one of the elements I liked about the books is even though you're traveling between stars, time still passes. So even though the ship speeds up, you get time dilation, so a 10-year journey to another star from the perspective of the ship is maybe 4 years, but for an AI that's a long time, so he created sort of a virtual environment for himself to exist in, and then being a computer, he was able to reduce his processing speed so that the journey didn't feel like it took as long. So, a second of time may have felt like, 20, 30 minutes, an hour, just because he sort of throttled down his processing. But on the other side, in battles, he can ramp himself up and basically think at a faster speed if he needed to. But like I say, very good books. I highly recommend them. Like even my wife, who's not a huge sci-fi fan, she got into them too, so. And that's, I think, sort of where I've been at as far as building models lately. Like my big plan going into this month is, obviously I just finished the one shuttle, but I also want to finish off the Mara. So that's my next big project. So I'm not quite sure if I'm going to get to that quite today because it's getting close to our supper time, so I'm probably going to have to leave in about 20 minutes, half an hour, and start figuring out something to cook. But outside the Mara, I want to do the Nemesis from Transformers, so basically Megatron's ship. See if I can find a picture of that. So I'll just drag that over here. Let's see if it opens any bigger. And unfortunately, finding high-resolution pictures of the ship were quite hard to come by. So that's sort of the basic design of the ship. So I think it'll be sort of an interesting change from my normal day-to-day model building. And this is sort of a cutaway picture of the same ship. So this is sort of showing it from the underside, so it has a sort of a big turret on the underside, and I don't know if I'll get quite carried away with small gun emplacements, but I definitely want to do a lot of the paneling that it has throughout it. And like I say, if I do get a chance, I do want to do another module for the Abydos class. And then my big goal, if I quite get that far this month, is again, being a huge Transformer fan, is I always liked Galvatron's ship from the animated Transformer movie. So again, sort of a challenging design, but again, I think it'll be sort of a fun change from the normal Stargate sort of elements. Like, I'll still be doing quite a bit of Stargate stuff, because my big overall goal is to slowly build up my fleets and carry on doing my different spec sheets, which I've actually finally got around to doing. So this is sort of one of the spec sheets that I've done. So this one's sort of 4 pages, so the first page sort of gives background on the ship and sort of its history, and then the next page sort of gives you a breakdown of the tech elements, and my third page sort of covers, where the different elements are located on the ship. And I did a fourth page to sort of bring the module element to the forefront for people, just to sort of quell some of the many questions on, are you going to do something with the empty space? But as I do different elements, I think I'm going to do different pages for different modules, and same thing when I finally get around to doing spec sheets for the Abydos. I want to sort of do a very similar concept where I include different pages for different modules. So sort of here's the one I've done for the Phoenix. And I'm probably going to do, again, like what I did with the jumper, and have a page with a breakdown of what different parts of the ship specifically do. And originally I wanted to do, like these are being made to be used in sort of a free art book that I was working towards, sort of my own guide to a post-disclosure Stargate world. But basically, because of the scope of the project and just to not make it as overwhelming, I'm going to focus on the ship elements and try to do as much of the fleet that I've done so far and combine them together into basically a ship guide. And so when I release, it'll be like a version 1 ship guide, and as I do more stuff, I'll do more pages and then incorporate them into the whole, and then re-release it as later versions. And like hopefully stuff like this will be useful to the RPGing community, and they can sort of maybe use them in setting up campaigns and stories, and help them flesh out their own little own playing universes for gaming. And that's again pretty much where I've been for the last 2 months. And like as far as streaming, like one of the reasons that I haven't been around as much is work for us. Like my full-time job, which is in construction, has been absolutely crazy busy, like trying to get things done, and just almost like too much to sort of split myself away, and dealing with supply shortages and that kind of thing has been sort of eating up a lot of my time. And then another part of why I haven't been around is for a little while, just health-wise, I haven't been feeling overly sort of great. They were sort of doing adjustments to my medications and that just sort of made me feel a little worn out, and it just really made it hard to focus on things and just put the energy into anything outside of my normal modeling and my normal work. And so it just made it hard to do the other element of trying to do streaming on top of everything else, which anybody that follows my work knows that I'm got my hands into quite a bit of different elements. And as far as the picture that you sent me, again, like I always say, a ship doesn't feel right until you've done a booty shot. Oh yeah, definitely hard to do everything, and at times I feel like I try to do too much for people. Like I love the community, I love interacting with people, and just sometimes there's only so much of you to go around, and you have to focus on your personal elements at times. And so that's why I've sort of been a little bit away in that element and tried to focus on sort of the other aspects of my modeling and community. Like I've continued on Facebook, Devon and Art Station. I've recently started on Twitter because through some of my conversations with people from my Patreon page as far as 3D printing. They sort of suggested it as a sort of a good way to reach out to that community and sort of get involved in that aspect. And so that's been a bit of a learning curve because it's a very different type of social media. Like Devon and Art, Facebook, you post something a day, you share it in a few places, and it sort of does its thing. And Twitter is more of a now sort of a environment where it almost feels like you have to be more involved and sort of going along with it. A little bit more real time, I guess. Again, sort of like Discord, but I like Discord because it's more of a real time conversation, and obviously there's the option for video chats, and so it brings a lot of nice elements that I do enjoy when I have time to use them. So before I sort of finish up today, we'll sort of look at the Mara, and so my goal is to sort of do a little bit of work on this tomorrow. So I'm hoping around 10 a.m. give or take, I'll be able to pop on for a few hours and get some done. And I think the elements that I'm going to focus on when I work on this one tomorrow is I want to finish filling in these sort of sunken areas. I want to build some mechanical components that'll sort of sit in there. And I want to sort of focus on the front end and try to get the front end sort of done. Like actually get a section of the ship where it's, pretty much completely done. Well, I used to be on forums for quite a long time. Like the biggest forum that I was part of is Space Paddles forum. It was probably the first web forum that I ever joined, and over the years I've gone up the ranks. I was in there for a while, and eventually sort of stepped away from it, and now it's under new ownership. So for a community, I think it's been around for almost 20 years now. So for a web forum, that's quite a history to it. It started off as a sort of a versus debates forum, and the original owner, he was into 3D design, and he would do space battles, animations, pitting Babylon 5, Star Wars, Star Trek against each other, and that sort of got me into 3D design myself, because I saw that you follow these shows, you love your shows, and then there's people that are taking these shows and actually building ships from them, and they're doing battles that are almost better than what the shows had. Like obviously internet back then was a little different and slower, so your video size was a lot smaller, but the quality, the imagination was there, and it really inspired me to start doing 3D design. And again, a lot of the members there at the time were sort of getting into the same thing, and so sort of with their support and that's where I started to learn 3D design. And obviously pretty rough back then, and improved over the years. But that was sort of my start with forums and 3D forums. Like I spread out from there. One of the big ones that I spent a lot of time in was the Gate World forum, because me and a few of my friends there, we were the ones that started the what was it, I think it was called Calling All Stargate Fans design thread in there. And again, a lot of good designs, a lot of interesting different views from different people on where the show could go. And we expanded from that and ended up at Sci-Fi Meshes, if I remember, and we had a thread there, and that's where I came across Scorpius, and he was pretty big into Stargate modeling, as was myself. And we talked for a while, and we decided instead of just being sort of a thread ourselves, we could take it to the next level, and we started our own web forum calling all Stargate fans, obviously in the same way as the thread was called. Yeah, I'm also part of the Sci-Fi Meshes Discord. Just haven't posted tons there, but sort of jumping back. Obviously, we created our own web forum calling all Stargate fans, and we actually built up quite a community of Stargate modelers. And as we sort of evolved from there, we eventually changed the name of the forum to Lightspeed Art. So it almost became like a miniature Sci-Fi Meshes, and unfortunately over time just Scorpius got tied up with things in his life, and unfortunately the forum just sort of disappeared as people moved on with their lives. But it was a pretty good period of time, and I definitely feel fortunate to be a part of the people that were in that community. And well, even sort of discussing people from the community. Trying to think of her name. Mel, that just got into 3D modeling. So she's been working in SketchUp, and we've been trying to sort of get her involved into Blender to sort of advance her skills. But over the last while, she came a long way. But the reason that she got into 3D modeling is her dad used to be part of the Gate World thread, and he used to be a big follower of my work, and ever since I came back, he sort of knows that I was doing Stargate stuff again, so he mentioned to his daughter that, you should check this out, and, she basically sort of got hooked on the concept of Stargate 3D modeling and sort of followed in her family footsteps. Well, and for me it's extra special because, I was part of these communities, and a lot of the work that I did basically influenced these people and, encouraged them to take up 3D designing. And so from what I did, allowed him to do what he did, which influenced his daughter. So for me it's special because, I was basically involved in getting these people involved in the community, involved in the aspect of design, and even his daughter supporting her and encouraging her to improve her art. Like, it's pretty scary when you're starting out, and there's a lot of people that will pick apart your work, and it's nice to have positive encouragement. Like, for me, I try to look, when you're starting out, your work is never going to be perfect. But it's nice to have somebody that'll look at what you're doing and be like, here's what you're doing right. You're actually not doing too bad. And here's where you can take it. And sort of nurture them, and, hopefully down the line, maybe they'll, improve, maybe they'll become better than you. Well, for me, it's sort of like having like art children. So you're sort of raising them, and as a proud parent, you're always happy when they start to succeed, and you're like, I've done my part. Now I can take the training wheels off and let them ride on their own, and it's great to see them become artists. Oh, and one of the elements that I want to sort of add before I do go is one of my other goals this month is I've been slowly working on doing up calendar backgrounds. So I've been going through my post-disclosure Stargate fleet, and basically I want to release 2 different calendars on Definite Art for the 2022 season that people, if they want to purchase, I figure it's a really good way that if somebody actually wants to hang my art somewhere, it would be a good way to sort of do it, because at least it's a practical thing. At least you have a calendar, you can sort of enjoy it, and then you get to enjoy the good art. So something I'm trying to aim for, trying to get done this month. So definitely a busy month ahead. And again, that's sort of my bigger plan is, for me, I want to take my hobby to the next level where hopefully, like, it's starting to get to the point, but where it basically starts to cover its own costs and, hopefully generates a little bit extra where I can start to expand some of the software that I've been wanting to get, and, just sort of taking a little bit of the financial burden away from the personal side and just allowing myself to start doing better and more interesting art and bringing it to the people that have supported and enjoyed it over the years. And for the people that have supported me on things like Patreon and have done commissions, I definitely appreciate what they've done and given to me, and I've put it to good use. Like this year, I'm pretty close to finally upgrading my version of Lightwave, which has been sort of a little bit on the older side because I originally got it when I was doing modeling in the Gate world sort of time, and then I took a hiatus from 3D modeling, and then when I got back in, obviously things were outdated, and just at the time I didn't have the money to dump into it because we just, me and the wife got married and COVID happened, and it sort of tightened up the financial aspect. So I'm finally close to the aspect of upgrading that software, and hopefully a few other things that I can purchase software-wise this year to sort of improve my art and make things a little bit better. And then my big goal for next year is, if I save up enough, it's about time to do the whole computer rebuild. So a lot of exciting things to look forward to that I'm bringing out. And as I said, I definitely appreciate the support of everybody that's helped me out over the year. But sort of jumping back to the Mara before I go, and as I said, I do want to focus on the mechanical elements here tomorrow, and then I also want to sort of finish off some of the front area. Like, I don't think it'll be 100% done tomorrow, but she'll start to feel like a finished ship soon. And I'm still debating on what to do. Like, I want to incorporate some sort of weapon system in here. I'm thinking some sort of energy cannons with maybe some sort of drone launchers in between. Like maybe dual cannons with some sort of launcher section in between. Yeah, time flies. And as far as the Mara, I'm going to build it sort of entry hatch sort of in the back. It seems to be my traditional place to shove them. So, and one of the other things I do want to try maybe at this later on in this year is with some of my smaller models, just because it's a lot to take on, but I would like to actually try to do some floor plans of the internal layouts of some of the ships. It's something that I've thought about for a long time, and I've tried a bit on and off, but never really got to the point where I could fully try it out. I might actually have a drawing of that. So here's one that I did it for the Tempest. Like, the scale has changed some, so it's all sort of muckered up anyways, but I sort of started at the top, which, the first deck was your bridge section. So you sort of have your command area, and then it had sort of a walkway between, and it sort of led to your astro navigation and sort of that kind of aspect. And sort of from our conversation earlier, obviously your ship has to have a washroom, sort of a boardroom section, sort of a rest area for the bridge crew if somebody had to lay down for a bit. You have an elevator, lift, stairs, some storage areas. Let's see if I can find the other one. Where did you go? Ah, there we go. Well, and that's why, like with these, I tried to separate the external elements. I tried to basically line around the internal elements to sort of create a separation. And again, the next deck down has sort of the mess hall area, some of the command crew cabins. These would be like your captain and first officer quarters, and your rooms would have their own bathrooms, and then there would be public bathrooms. Oh, I know it would be like too much, like your eyes would just go buggy trying to focus on all the different elements. And just sort of random fun things, like again a concept design for a Star Trek ship that I did years back. I wanted something a little bit non-conventional, so you sort of have the the bridge area, and then it sort of connects up to a pod with the engines coming down and then connecting into the main area. And then various other concept art, like I had an idea for an ancient, basically sort of like a battle space station. So it'd be this giant sort of wrapping structure, and then sort of to give a context of how big Atlantis would be to the actual station itself. And then I was trying to come up with possible future villains for my sort of post-Stargate disclosure world, because at some point we'll need somebody to fight that would be at least on par with ourselves that aren't replicators. But just a lot of little fun elements. Like this was I think this was going to be some sort of civilian ship. I don't know if it was going to be for Stargate, but basically sort of a concept that I think I'll try to pick up at some point of this year and finish off. Like it almost could fit into something like the Orville, for example. And again, some of the low polygon models that I made years and years and years back when I was helping different mod teams. Again, technology has improved since, and low polygon then is not the same as low polygon now. Again, sort of like a different type of ghoul design. And again, some fun stuff from back in the day, talking about web forums. So I was sort of digging through some of my old saved images, and I found a bunch from back when Lightspeed art was still around. So it was sort of interesting to see some of the old names of different people that were involved in the community at the time, and Yeah, it was definitely sort of a blast from the past. Again, I wish I saved more of the images that everybody sort of made back in the day. And again, some more of the low polygon models that I was playing with. This was sort of a jumper fighter concept. So maybe at some point in the future I'll actually do a proper high polygon model of that. And then sort of a concept for like an Ori sort of related shuttlecraft. But no, a lot of good things from the past, but I think that sort of brings me to where I'm going to call it today. I think my wife's trying to call me and tell me it's time to start cooking something up for dinner. So thank you for everybody that's shown up to watch, and definitely appreciate going over the models, and enjoyed working on the Gould shuttle that I just finished off. And again, tomorrow I think around 10 a.m. my time, so that's Mountain Daylight Time. I'm probably going to work more on the Mara and start getting that finished. Okay, well, thank you everybody, and have yourselves a good day, and I'll see you tomorrow.